Tinfoil Hat Club, Scott Hensler, 04-05-2017. Well, we're going to try it again. I've got Virginia Farver on the line here. This time we're going to do Skype. We got knocked off and was, really never connected back on that last show, and we really were just in the middle of things. So she's here to continue with what we were talking about. Now, I wanted to confirm May 12th, 13th, and 14th, 2017, for Hayden, Idaho, the conference that I'll be presenting here at the Atrium Business Center. And I've just now posted on Tinfoil Hat Club a link for that to give the itinerary of the events, the dates, and the times. And if you come from out of state to come for this, the best place to fly in would be Spokane. So it's just general information for now, and then I'll bring more detail into that. And again, I want to thank everyone for supporting. I've been extremely busy doing these deliverances. That's just nonstop. It just surprises me how much I was slammed, but at the same time, when, going to a new media and getting to more people, then more people are brought up to speed on this and looking for the answers. And of course, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we have prayer, weproclaim.com. Julie Thompson and I are doing this show. We did a show last night for about an hour and a half, and we took a lot of prayer requests. And so we were very busy for that time doing just that, and we are going to continue. So again, the normal Tinfoil Hat Club, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and We Proclaim Tuesdays and Thursdays. It's 5 o'clock normally for Tinfoil, and right now, until I can get caught up on the prayer requests and the deliverances for We Proclaim, it's 6 o'clock on. And so there you go. All right, Virginia, I've got you unmuted, and welcome back. And
thank you, Scott.
Yeah, it was terrible what happened, but, it was amazing, the response from the show. We really didn't get a chance to talk about that. It was easily 3 and 4 times the listenership just because of that show. So I would estimate probably right now there's at least 1,500 people listening.
Good.
So that's a good start for a live show, and then of course there's the archives. But I think maybe you might want to reintroduce yourself, and then we'll just pick up where we left off. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm Virginia Farver, and I lost a son in 2008 from glioblastoma brain cancer, and my son was living in San Diego at the time. The neurosurgeon at the time told us that his cell phone caused the brain tumor, and after he only lived 7 months. After he passed, I started researching cell phones, and I found out that he was involved in a brain cancer cluster of people on the San Diego State University campus. So I've gotten involved, and I've been involved in 3 other cancer clusters, and they're all overexposures from wireless radiation, and I'm just here to warn people.
Yes. In fact, when we were talking last, you had brought it to my attention that it was the dirty electric that we were discussing when we got cut off. And so I don't know how many heard my explanation of it. I'm actually familiar with it because I used to deal with parasitic and different transits, different harmonics that were an issue with spiking other communication. And so when you have something like this, what you have is not just the fundamental 60 hertz power that we're surrounded by, which, by the way, is just a little higher than what our brains operate on the higher end. So there is an influence regardless of what they say. But when you have all these spikes, then what you have is an interruption, meaning that our minds, our bodies, with the different waves that come at us at different angles, different amplitudes, different frequencies, and the wide bandness of it isn't just a specific frequency, but it covers several. And because of that, then there's a great effect. And when you have it in a constant form that's repeated over and over again, then the damage that's done to the tissue does not get time to repair itself correctly. And so the repair that does take place is that, like, the chromosomes are damaged. So the tissue replicates itself out of order. And that's when you get tumors, that's when you get cancers, that's when you get these things. So dirty electricity is definitely an issue. So go ahead, and what's your take on it?
Well, I've talked a lot of a simple term, as they say, that the wiring in your home or wherever you're located becomes a huge antenna. So, and it is also the spiking of all the currents coming through your walls. So, and Scott, this is part of the problem with the opt-out smart meters, because these are the ones that put dirty electricity through the wiring of your home, and you have to be very careful with filtering. And there's a lot of people that have been very concerned about this.
Yeah, the fluorescent lights in your house, by the way, they have to be started. They have to ignite the plasma. And in order to do that, then there's a high spike that comes in. And then there's the oscillation of the plasma itself, and that is an emitter. So you're right about the wiring itself being an antenna, which can both pick up or transmit. In either case, we're completely surrounded. No matter where you are within a resident area, even if you're in a farm, you've got power. And industrial centers, by the way, are the worst because they have motors that turn on and off. They have what they call starters, and in that starter, there's a high current surge. That creates a very high magnetic field. And then the capacitors that are involved in it itself, the way that it operates, and then the arcing. And in fact, the original transmitters, like from Tesla, was referred to as the spark gap transmitters, spark gap oscillators. And that was very, very dirty electricity. So go ahead.
Yes. And I don't think people quite understand. Smart meters, actually, they have what's called a nerve disrupting frequency. So this stuff affects you. And I try and tell people wherever your smart meter is on your home, there is a 92-foot diameter plume of radiation. So about 46 feet outside and 46 feet inside your home. And then you have all of the smart meters communicating with each other. And then there is a collector home every 500 to 700 homes, and then they also go to other cell towers. They transmit to cell towers or other collector units. For instance, where I live, we've got these collector units on our arterial streets and on our major intersections, and ours look like white boxes with four little stubby short antennas on the top of it. But each of those, Scott, transmits 125 square miles of pulsed RF radiation. So we're completely blanketed in this stuff.
Right. Now, when we're talking about a collector, so with the data, the digital data that is transferred, there's a buffer. Otherwise, data comes in, it takes it into memory, then it has to release it, and when it does, it sends it down the line. That's also referred to as a transponder. Transponders are the general term for cell towers. So in essence, then you said I think every 5 homes or whatever it is, then that is a cell tower site that is doing double duty.
It's every 500 to 700 homes.
Okay. And by the way, you said the distance for how far the plume, which we really refer to as what we call the near field. And in that near field is the highest radiation per square centimeter that causes the most damage to tissue. So right. If you're on the other side of the wall and your bed's right there, you're getting cooked.
Right. Mm-hmm. And, anybody who lives in an apartment building that has a bank of these, boy, actually in the film Take Back Your Power, which I'm in, and you can access this by www.takebackyourpower.net. This film goes into all of that. They actually take readings from inside of an apartment that has a bank of these meters, and they pretty much have said it's not habitable, so you cannot live in this apartment without being harmed. So I want people to understand this stuff, and also here in town. Now I haven't been all over the country, but the smart grid also includes all of the security cameras that are attached to all of our major intersections in town. So it's just a huge surveillance net is what it is.
Absolutely. In fact, the cameras, what they're doing is their facial recognition, They used to say to us, well, that was so they could monitor the intersections. And at one time, the cameras actually were pointed into the intersections, but that was just a ploy, because within a few years, then all the cameras then start pointing towards traffic coming and going and do not monitor the intersection. So you have license plate and facial recognition, and if they're remote, then they will have transmitters in the microwave. But generally, most of them that I've seen, like in our area, they're fiber optic. So when it comes to the meters, I want to back up now. If you have 1 meter, okay, and let's say that it's transmitting 1 watt, when you put 3 meters up, the combined together, the effective radiant power becomes 3 watts. So when you have a bank on the wall and you're on the other side and there's 10 there, you're getting hit with 10 watts, where if it was a single home, it'd be 1 watt. And so there you go. I mean, that's exponential. There's a thing called the 4-square law, and I want to go into it too much, but the further you get away, it reduces by half. Like if you get 4 times, and so the idea is to be as far away from these as possible, and of course the ideal situation is to completely remove it altogether.
Correct. And this has been one of my questions for the utilities. I want to know how they have installed their own telecommunication network. Is that even legal? So, this is another avenue that we can maybe go down. So, and I've been on conference calls with Curtis Bennett, the thermal guy, and you can look his information up online. He actually talks about this cloud. When you have all of this wireless stuff going off at the same time, it creates this 190 billion pulses per second in the atmosphere. And he said over time, he said you take a piece of sheetrock and you flip it 190 billion times per second, and he says, you tell me how long that sheetrock's going to last. He said this will literally dustify our concrete foundations on our home over time, and it's going to be awful for firefighters to fight fires and all types of problems. So
yeah, you brought it to my attention that these are not even UL approved.
Right. They where I live, I went to city council and I brought this up. It's funny because when I go to city council now, they always have the head of the utilities show up, but I brought up the fact that I said they lack UL certification, and they've already caused thousands and thousands of home and business fires all over the world. But they sent me, within a week, they sent me a couple of documents where it shows that they have UL certification. So don't fall for this. It's not the highest level of UL certification. And the other thing I want to bring up is our utility head. When I spoke, they started speaking about this, and they said they own the box, they own the meter, but the problem is they do not own the wall that the meter's onto, and they do not own the wiring behind that meter. So the problem is, and I'm warning people, because these fires, they start and they damage your home, and a lot of times your insurance will not cover them, and the utilities know this. Yeah. So it's very damaging.
Right. And you were also mentioning, too, that they have lithium batteries in it. And yes, the consumption of lithium has been so high that the Chinese have been the ones that are the primary suppliers of these batteries. And they're not held to the standards that they are in the U.S. here. So this is why a lot of the computer fires that you've seen, and many of those little motorized scooters were catching on fire. If you operate the battery outside of its specifications, especially in cold temperatures, by the way, that's another
right
thing. Whenever you take a lithium battery and you plunge it into below freezing temperatures and then try and operate it in its normal operating parameters, the battery will actually short inside. And once that shorts, then it in itself becomes a fire hazard.
Right. And the other thing, too, is some of the components within the meters themselves are not UL certified. And that is some of the problem. The moisture's getting, you have fluctuations in weather and with temperatures and moisture and all this stuff. And this stuff is, and if anybody goes out and looks at these things, they're really they're cheap, they're plastic, and this moisture can get down inside of there and short things out. So, and people are finding out that the insurance companies will not pay for damages. So I ask people to call your insurance companies. If we had 1 million people calling their insurance companies and had them put that in writing that they will cover damages if there's a smart meter fire, I think maybe we could get somewhere with this.
Yeah, that's a very good idea. Hit them right where it hurts in the pocket there.
Right.
So what else have you got for us? I know you got a million things.
Well, I was talking about these cancer clusters, and the one at SDSU, of course, was the heparin cell tower. It's all government, it's all military, and what happened is there was an epidemiologist that was involved in all three of these cancer clusters in California, and there was an extra one for a different one, but this man has been involved in all of this, and he has been hiding the truth from all of this from all the parents. But I also ask parents to maybe get hold of your school district and ask them what their policy is on the health and welfare of the kids. What we're finding out is these should have all had toxicology studies, and these investigations were all stopped by epidemiology reports, which tell you absolutely nothing. So it's very frightening when you can't even send your child to school for an education anymore, and you've got to worry about their health. I personally, and this grid is pretty much on every college campus across the United States, and that's frightening to me.
Yes. The children in the womb, I mean, here they are in the, supposed to be surrounded by love and protection, and in reality, they're just in a microwave oven. And so I just can't even imagine. Oh, by the way, you sent me an article with somebody who had 2 children that were autistic, and then when they got them out of the home, things changed?
Well, not last fall, but the fall before, they had a wireless conference in Palo Alto, California, and it was in a huge auditorium, and we had several people show up. Katie Singer, the author of An Electronic Silent Spring. My son's story is the first chapter of that book, by the way, but she's been working with doctors. So many people in this audience, after they were talking about smart meters and wireless, they were like, but we live in Silicon Valley. I mean, they were kind of freaked out, I'm going to be honest with you. But Katie has worked with some doctors in California with autistic children, and they found out she worked with one specific family that had 2 autistic kids. And this gentleman was told to shut all the power off to his home at night and have no wireless, no cell phones in the house, anything. And within 2 weeks, both kids were speaking full sentences. So this stuff is damaging our kids, and it's going to for decades to come if we don't get it stopped. Yeah,
I know when I was in Taiwan, there was an interview with a particular doctor who was saying if he can get a child about 1 year or 2 years of age and run them through chelation, that he can reverse those effects. So it looks like maybe radio waves and then the heavy metals within the brain of these children, most likely from vaccinations and stuff, that to me, it looks like there's a connection there.
Right. And basically the same chemical is released in a child's brain when they get a text or they get a phone call as morphine and heroin. So this is why we see such an addiction to this stuff. I've actually talked to kids that say they'd rather die than live without their cell phone. So I don't know how to turn this around, but it's going to be a huge effort, but we need a lot of parents to start turning this around. And also the thing that I worry about too is, these kids get these phones at younger and younger ages, and, everything you text, everything you say, a lot of this stuff's going to go into data centers, and they can use it against you, decades down the road. So I just tell people to be very careful to give these things to their kids. And so, how to stop it, Scott, I don't know how to do it, but we need to.
I have a sister-in-law who was a teacher in a Christian school, and there was a young boy who just would not stop texting during class. And so she took the phone away, and the child literally went into a fetal position on the floor. He was so addicted to that phone. Now, I know that some kids actually will sleep with the phone and put it under their pillow as if it's, some type of friend.
I'm glad you brought that up. I actually broke that to Dr. Sam Milham in 2009, and so he started writing about that. The kids put these things under their pillows, and this is frightening. I actually talked to a gentleman here where I live that his wife, they had a realtor team together, and she passed away from glioblastoma brain cancer. So I was talking to him, and I said, did she have a cell phone? And he said, well, she did, but she didn't really use it that often. He said, you know what she did do at night, though? He said she would play games on one of these little, I don't have anything wireless, iPad or something like that, and then she would put it under her pillow at night because it kept her head warm.
Oh, my goodness.
And it kept her pillow warm. So anyway, I just advise people to do that, to be real careful. And then also, Katie Singer broke this to me, about a year ago, that if you use one of these books, these wireless books to read from, your brain, after time, you will not be able to go back to reading out of a regular book. So this is another warning for people. All this wireless stuff is incredibly dangerous, and it's all cumulative radiation. So the more you receive, the more damaging it becomes.
Yeah, just like X-rays. That's, remember they are always
right.
keeping track of that when we were young, how many X-rays you had at the dentist and so forth. Absolutely. The 5G is also going to play an important role for the technology of cars that have to do with the smart cars that are, as they're going down the freeway, if there's an emergency, they'll all get the signal to start braking. And so that literally means every car is going to be 5G. Each car will be like the smart meters, like transponders. And it's beyond my comprehension. I'm a ham radio operator, and I've been using radio for a long time. But my radios always have an antenna that's 100 feet and 100 feet up in the air, and it's a lower frequency, and it's very short term. And so I don't really know of anyone myself that's had any problem. But I have to admit, when I use my handheld radios, which is like a walkie-talkie, that now that I'm more sensitive to radio, that I get what's like a metal taste in my mouth. And I've heard other people say this who work on cell towers. And I took a very hard hit from electric, 480 volts, almost 10 years ago. And when I got hit, that's when I tasted in my mouth was metal. And so there's an indication of what it does to the blood. Any metals that we do have in us. And then again, we look at chemtrails with the aluminums, with the other metals that they put in out there, and now our bodies that are absorbing it. And now we have this radio wave coming through. Just you put tinfoil in a microwave, and what happens? It sparks, and they tell you not to do it. And here our bodies are loaded with it.
Right, and then I've told people in 2002 there were several complaints about that heparin cell tower on the SDSU campus because in 2002 it was capable of reaching distances of 72 miles in all directions. So this is one cell tower, folks, so you can imagine what we're living under. And then it's connected to several different grids, and I've been looking up cancer clusters along the California coast, and it follows right along where all these grids are at. So this stuff's going to kill us, folks. And I want to warn people about that. And the 5G frequencies that are coming out, I mean, it's the same frequencies used by the military active denial system. And so, I mean, I can't believe that we've gone down this road so far. I started fighting this back in 2009, and every time I'm just like, oh no, this just can't be happening. And it is, Scott. It's very sad. Yeah.
Now, I've had radio burns, RF burns we call it, where some of the transmitters I worked on were very high powered, and then some of the power would get away and there would be a surface radiation on, let's say, an off button or one of the control buttons. You'd reach down to go push the button. Next thing you know, you get your finger burned. And what's bad about these is that it doesn't burn on the outside like you would from a thermal burn. It actually burns from the inside out. So
it's like a microwave.
Yeah, so the bone is engaged in this, and it burns all the way through, and it takes a very long time to heal, even if it does heal right.
And oddly enough that you brought that up, I've got pictures of my son when he started school at SDSU, and he looks perfectly healthy, normal. And at his graduation picture, it's just astonishing. He looks kind of a reddish gray tint in his skin. I mean, I could tell he was squinting with his right eye in every picture, and that's where his tumor was located. And folks, this is the other thing I worry about, Scott, with all these connected cars. You know, you talk about EHS symptoms, you know, electrohypersensitivity, and my son had a lot of these, but fatigue is one, concentration, memory problems. So I just envision all these people on the highways that are going to be impaired. So it's very frightening to me. And electric car batteries, I urge people to please do not buy an electric car. Katie Singer has spoken about this before. There's something that engages when you push on a brake, even in a Prius actually, and that will charge the battery back up. And that can actually interfere with pacemakers and any kind of medical implants. And I've also been told by some of these experts to never sit your child near one of those batteries. So it's you know, we've got to get this stuff stopped and tell people not to buy this stuff. They're not going to change the world in any way. They're going to harm themselves.
Yeah. So the theory behind that is you have devices called triacs and SCR, silicone control rectifiers. And with triacs, what they do is instead of turning something on and off, it regulates it. So you can take what would be like a 60 hertz or 120 hertz and then chop it up. So then what that means is the battery's being pulsed, and it's being pulsed with a high amount of current. And so whatever that pulse rate is, that mimics frequency. And so you literally would be sitting next to something with a high current, again, like that near field that you were discussing for smart meters.
Yes, and so I urge parents and everybody to please do not buy these cars if you've got a family, and you know they're going to have to figure out something else, because this whole grid, even the where I live, I don't know about anybody else, but here in Colorado we've got the actual smart grid itself. They put that in without telling anybody either, but they're huge rust-colored power lines, and people can get sick up to 2 miles away from those things. So you need to be very aware of your surroundings and try to avoid as much of this stuff as possible right now, because I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of people getting sick. Yeah.
It was brought to my attention, someone asked a question the other day about light poles, and the light poles now are what they call smart poles, and so they have cameras and microphones built into them now. It's very much like what's called the tripwire system in Europe. The Five Eyes are like the United States, Canada, Britain, Japan, and a few others. And what it is, it's basically the NSA have tied all the grid networks together. So so one country, let's say Britain, could literally use the system here in the United States to monitor U.S. citizens and vice versa. So they all have access to all the data. But now all the light poles now are going to be part of this system. Of course, they would probably be have the 5G attached to it anyways. But
right,
now,
and it communicates with the grid there.
Yes.
What I've heard is they're called Intella streetlights. Is that what you're referring to?
Uh-huh.
And so that's another thing. And they're gonna have cameras in them. You know, everything is under the guise for our safety, and that's not what it's about.
Yeah. Yeah. You know,
and then have you guys, and then our city, and I'm sure most of the other cities around the U.S. have just approved something called dark skies. And I don't know if you've heard of that before, but they're going to now. It's because we've got too much light pollution, and they want wildlife to run free through our cities. So they're going to start installing these LED blue lights in all of our street lights in our neighborhoods, and these will damage the retinas of your eyes. So this stuff, I just cannot believe we've gone down this far.
Right. In fact, the blue spectrum, if anyone, there's a website called Wicked Laser, and people can buy these high-powered lasers. They're amazing. But one of the worst ones you can buy is one that is blue, because it happens to be in that spectrum that, just like you said, the retina is absolutely damaged. So these lights that you're talking about would be in that spectrum, and that's exactly the effect, would be damage to the retina. Wow.
Well, I get into this conversation with people because a lot of people, I truly think it's a eugenics program, and a lot of people think that that's crazy talk. But, I just don't understand why the powers that be, would allow something like this to happen if there wasn't something nefarious behind all of it. So, I'm trying to figure out what's behind all that. But, boy, you almost can't even go anywhere. And also I was telling you, Scott, about FirstNet for emergency responders. And that's also going to piggyback off of the grid, and it's supposed to go nationwide, worldwide. And you can look it up online. It's Horizon 2020 out of the UK. And rural areas are their targets. So there's literally will be no place to run or hide. So it's very frightening to me. And I actually found documents, testimonies from the Iridium Corporation, where they stated they wanted to cover every square inch of the United States in these emissions.
Wow. Yeah, and I think they're probably doing that to some degree already. If you have somebody who is continually actions and behaviors such as alcohol or various things that are damaging to the body, that's referred to as a passive suicide. So with eugenics that you're talking about, they know that this is killing us. They know that we're being abused. So yes, absolutely, it is eugenics. It is the ends, the means in itself, that the population of reduction. And so yes, absolutely.
And boy, Scott, they've got us right where they want us, because they've got people so addicted to cell phones. And this is what, ever since 2009, when I found out about that cell tower on campus, that has been my biggest problem. I could kind of avoid some of the areas where there were cell phones being used, but now we're to the point where the infrastructure is becoming a huge problem. It's making people sick. People can be targeted. People can, they can kill you with this stuff, and they're going to.
Yeah, I was reading an article on the Wi-Fi refugees, and I'm unfortunately becoming more and more sensitive to this, and I've been actually struggling. I know I'm targeted, but at the office that I've moved in here, they've got a control room that a competition for cable has brought a new cable in. And ever since they brought that new cable in, I've been having problems. And my Acousticom that I've just got a couple weeks ago, I went down there and it's off the charts. And so I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing here. If I'm going to be staying in this office, I'm going to have the conference in May. But after that, I may make the decision to get out of here. And probably what I'll do is just work out of an apartment or a cabin somewhere just to get out of this radiation area.
I get contacted a lot, and people have been, I have been contacted by so many people that get sick, and there's literally no place to hide anymore from all of this. And so Scott, I just don't know what the answer is. I think that there will be a lot of people that I talk to think there's going to be a huge body count, and then maybe something will be done. And I hope that isn't the case. But, people just do not want to believe that this stuff was harmful, and it's not only harmful, it's deadly. So, and just remember that if you do use a cell phone, that you are adding to the infrastructure that's going in around all of your kids, and the kids are very, very susceptible to this stuff. Absolutely, and many of the toys, I'm sure, will have some interaction. I know there's some that already have infrared, which actually isn't that big of an issue. But since the 5G and some of the others, so many of the toys are probably going to have this as well. I know that there was somebody who had a mobile that was over the child's crib, and I had talked about this before, that had to do with Pokemon. And it's a long story, and I want to get into it, but the problem was that the general curse behind this particular item that was over the child caused the child not to be able to sleep.
And so I can just imagine what's in the forefront for trying to entertain children. Oh, the other thing, too, is, everyone's buying DVDs or monitors to put on the back of the seats in the cars to keep the kids entertained. And so now you have children for hours and hours that are being, because those are going to have Bluetooth in them, too. Oh,
right.
Oh, by the way, I went through a drive-in the other day, and I had my Acousticom with me, and it was off the chart. It was pegged all the way. And I realized this was a brand new kind of a fast food thing. And so their sign where you made your order, it was Bluetooth. They didn't have hard wire to it. So it was actually a transceiver built in the sign. And I just wonder how many people were sitting there waiting in line were getting headaches because it was off the charts.
A lot of the stores are also going to digital coupons, which you have to have a cell phone for. And I have been complaining about this and saying, I don't have a cell phone. I will never have a cell phone, and I want these same deals. So this is all, they're trying to get us hooked on this stuff. And so, it's all about tracking too. They want to know what you're buying, where you're going, what you're doing at all times, and this all adds to it. So I urge people, I try to pay cash as much as I can. And also I was going to tell you, when you brought up the cribs, baby monitors.
Oh,
Please
yeah.
do not buy baby monitors. These things are really dangerous to put around your kids. And also they've been trying to sell something called smart pajamas. So these are apparently pajamas that you can wirelessly hook to a book or something like that, and the kids can entertain themselves in bed at night. So please just be really aware of this stuff and try to avoid it. That's all I ask.
Yeah, some of the camera monitors for baby cribs, they're the servers that would take that data or the video are being hacked into. And
right.
There's websites that have appeared where they've been hacked into, and you can pay to go online and actually watch, because people live within their homes and they have actions within their homes. So the baby cameras catch all kinds of things, and so it's an entertainment. So I won't ever have such a thing. Of course, I don't have children anymore, but anything of the cloud, ladies and gentlemen, I don't use the cloud. I will never have the cloud because my personal information is now stored somewhere else if I use the cloud. And in order to retrieve that, a lot of it's Wi-Fi. So if that's what you're doing, get out of that system because it can be taken from you. You'll never be able to retrieve it. And again, it's just part of the keeping you in bondage because then they control your data.
And it's just incredible the information they can get from these smart meters. I've actually read where they're going to know if you go to the bars at night and come home. They're going to know if your children are home alone. I mean, it's just incredible the information that they're going to get out. I actually went and testified in Denver at the CUP hearing because Xcel Energy wanted another $565 million to put in smart meters, and there were people that stood up and testified that had been starting these small businesses saying how incredibly valuable all of our information is. And I don't want them to have my information. I do not consent to it, and I never will.
Yeah. Samsung led the way for the smart TV, which had cameras built into it, along with microphones. And these cameras, and I've mentioned this before, back in the 90s, I had a small company where I built cameras that attached to microscopes and telescopes, and so I was one of the first ones to allow you to see in your own TV, what you could see through the telescope. And there was a generation of chips that I was working with that was Panasonic or Sony, I forget, but they were so sensitive that they sold these cameras that you took your pictures at night. Well, what they found was people would buy them and they would take them to the beach, and you were able to photograph through bathing suits. And so they had to modify these so they couldn't be used in the day, and then people learned how to get over that, and then they had to take it off the market. These same chips, this same sensitivity is what is in these TVs, in these devices. So they know, if you have, let's say, a weapon in your pocket, they know the change in your pocket. They certainly know a male from a female. and it's also in a grid formation that it can map your room. So let's say that there was to be an invasion or a task force such as a SWAT team to come in. They would simply go to that, and they would have the room mapped out and would know exactly what to do when they came in.
Right, and this whole thing is so much of it is surveillance. It's just incredible, and I'll tell you, I actually know a medical writer. I'm not going to mention her name on the program, but I contacted. When I found out about the brain cancer cluster in San Diego, at first I was really upset because none of the professors contacted me. But I tried to contact the administration, and boy, I just wasn't getting anywhere. I got it narrowed down to two people, and they were fighting between they would send me from one to the other constantly. So I got tired of it, and I just got in my car and I drove out there. And that's when I took pictures of this cell tower, by the way. But I met some of the professors off campus. And anyway, I came back home, and one of the professors on campus connected with one of these medical writers that I had been in contact with. And this gal went over to the campus and went into the room to talk to one of the classes for this professor. And she said she always brought up the fact that cell phones can damage your sperm. And she said that everywhere she's ever spoken, she says the boys will grab those cell phones out of their pockets and slam them on their desks or put them on the floor or whatever. And she said this whole group of kids were just zombies. She basically said they were zombies. And so she started to kind of go into talking about cell towers, and somebody walked into the room. Now, the professor told my friend, the medical writer, that she didn't even know who this was that walked in the room, and they stopped them from speaking about cell towers.
Wow.
So, I don't know, with DARPA on that cell tower, I mean, I can only imagine what they were doing with it.
Sure. A couple of years ago, I was asked to come and train a security team for a church for their radios that they carried. And when I was done, some of the people knew what I do, and they started asking me questions. And as soon as I started answering the questions, then a group of gentlemen kind of came out of nowhere and escorted me off of the stage, so I wasn't able to finish what I had asked. And so this is the church. This is the line of defense against evil, and yet they want to sweep it under the rug.
Correct. And speaking of churches, about 4 months ago, I got slammed with 5 or 6 churches, people calling me to find out what to do, because a lot of these churches have been hit to try to put cell towers on. And actually an area in Denver, I can't remember the carrier, but this one church was offered $500,000 up front for their installation of a cell tower, and they actually got it stopped. So I know that churches are a big, they like to hit those people because they're all scrambling for money, and that's a lot of money to give to a church.
Sure is. Years ago, I bet it's been 12 years ago, I met a gentleman in Flagstaff, Arizona. The hotel room I was in, he was in another room. We were just sitting out front enjoying the weather. And in the conversation, he actually owned a lot of property in the White Mountains of Arizona, and the cell companies approached him to put towers on his property. And all he said was that cell towers have been very, very good to him, because now he was retired. They give him so much money, he doesn't have to do anything else. So they'll pay premium for perfect locations.
Right, and the other thing that they like to do too is disguise them. The city was trying to put up a couple of real powerful cell towers, and we found out that they placed them just over city properties into the county, and we couldn't figure out what that was all about. But where I live here locally in Larimer County, they actually will not allow public input anymore at some of our meetings. So that's why they're doing some of this stuff, and they're disguising them. These 2 cell towers were put really close to some really expensive neighborhoods, and that's why people were up in arms. But, they disguised them to look like silos. So, they think this is going to keep people, subdued and not worried about things. But it's the radiation coming off of them that people need to be very, very concerned about.
Yeah, I've located one company in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and their towers they look like palm trees, and they look like saguaro cactus, and some of them look like pine trees. In fact, we've got one on a major mountaintop here that even the locals who lived here for a long time, they were scratching their head and they were saying, I grew up here. I don't remember that big pine tree on the top of that. And I said, well, it's not a pine tree. That's a cell tower. So, yeah, they are.
We actually have a pine tree here in town, a cell tower pine tree, and they actually planted pine trees around it, and all the pine trees are dead now. So, wow. I have a lot of people that contact me because, they're noticing this stuff, and I'm very grateful that people are really concerned about this. And I just urge parents, try and purchase a meter and try and go over on these campuses, get on antennasearch.com and make sure you know where every cell tower is on that campus. And if you cannot find that cell tower on that antennasearch.com, then it's probably military or government. So you want to be really, really aware of this stuff. And I live right here in town where Colorado State University is at, and I've gone over there with my meters. And Scott, I would not have a child on any of these campuses right now. I really wouldn't. Besides the cell towers, they've got Wi-Fi and they've all got cell phones. It's just the readings that I've gotten over in those areas are just horrific.
Well, I'm actually from Phoenix or Tempe, where Arizona State University is, and I know now that they have a public Wi-Fi on the campus, so any of the kids there that are going to school, they've got internet no matter where they are. So that network must be pretty intrusive.
Well, SDSU, I had a friend that sent me an article. This is last year sometime. They were putting Wi-Fi on the tennis courts. This is where they've just completely gone out of their minds with this stuff. And apparently people feel like they have to be connected at all times, and you really don't need to be, folks. I've lived without a cell phone since 2008, and when I watch people, I don't even understand it. I travel without a cell phone, and I do just fine. I buy phone cards, and I find a pay phone, and I'll call home once a week. I don't have long conversations and that kind of thing. And the only time anybody's really going to hear from me is if there's an emergency. And, it's kind of freeing, and it really is. And I've had a lot of people tell me that after they've gotten rid of their cell phones. Yeah.
Well, what you were talking about, dopamines and so forth, we've talked on this show about gang stalkers, the flying monkeys, that they actually get a high off of their phone whenever they accomplish their task by harassing somebody else. And then there's also the potential of them being scolded, having that either withdrawn or causing a pain if they did not complete their mission. And as crazy and as insane that is, that's the world we live in. The ones that are the actual gang stalkers, I've done a lot of many shows on that and research, and a lot of them were the homeless people who had nothing to gain. Most of them were mentally ill to begin with. That's why they were on the streets. And so when they're given a task such as this, they're actually told that they're complying or coming into agreement that the people that they're stalking need to be punished, need to be controlled. And so it just gives you an idea, like in Nazi Germany, they were referred to as brown shirts, people who would go along with the program, who really had nothing else going for them, and this gave them something to look forward to as far as being accepted or part of a society. But unfortunately, obviously, it's not a society that's for the betterment of man. So where we're at today with this gang stalking. Now, how about yourself? Do you deal with people who are targeted?
Well, when I first started, I've had several people call me. Yes, I actually know a couple of people that are targeted and that actually get burns from even being in their apartment at times. So I'm very aware of this, and a lot of times they will do this to people that speak out. And I just don't let myself go that way. I know that when I started speaking down at the city about smart meters, I knew for a while that I was being followed. So,
Mm-hmm.
as far as I didn't know anything about gang stalking at that time, but I did realize that I had been followed a few times. So, they will do anything they can to shut people up because they don't want you to know this stuff. I'm just amazed that in May of 2011, the World Health Organization actually reclassified everything wireless to a class 2B carcinogen. And actually, I have a document that's called the Who Knew. So in 2011, I can't recall. I think there were 29 countries that met with the IARC, the International Agency for Research on Cancer. And out of all those 29 countries, the United States was the only country to hold firm for the class 2B carcinogen. All the other ones wanted a class 2A carcinogen, which puts it in the same category as benzene and asbestos.
Mm-hmm.
So, and now there's been, over the last few months, there's been no confidence vote with the WHO, and actually there's a letter. It's called the ECERI newsletter. It's the European Cancer and Environmental Research Institute, and I sent this to you, Scott, I think last Friday, but they are demanding that this stuff get changed to a class 2A carcinogen. So, we're dealing with benzene and asbestos here, folks. When you're putting these things up against your heads, Dr. Sam Milham actually told me, and I knew this in 2009, he said these kids, you might as well put your head inside a microwave oven. It cooks you from the inside out, and that's what it does. And so I urge people to please don't get these cell phones for your kids.
Absolutely. And like I said to the people that are the normal listeners, when I got the Acousticom, I thought I had a fairly clean office, and then it turned out my mouse and my wireless keypad and some of the others were actually, because I was in the near field, being close to it, it actually was just as strong as any of the other radiation that I would be exposed to. So the content, the saturation or the concentration of the multiples to one was the main issue. And so I've cleaned that up quite a bit. But like I say, I'm in an office complex, and people are now buying wireless printers. All right, I won't have one. It's all Ethernet. Everything has to be hardwired. I had such a problem getting the thing to work correctly anyways. But everything is wireless now. And that's just insane, absolutely insane. Bluetooth is approximately 2.4 and then as high as 5 gigahertz, and that's microwave. And so there you go.
I'll tell you, people need to understand too. It's not just cell phones; it's cordless phones too. These cordless phones. I've taken readings. You basically have a base station for these cordless phones. And actually, there was the 2010 Interphone study, and it showed a 40% rate increase of brain tumors with people that had a 10-year latency period for cell phone use. And so. And Dr. Sam Milham was part of that, and I contacted him because I'd been working with him because we'd realized all the cell phone manuals tell you not to put these near your heads or bodies. And he told me that, of course, the media, you guys have to find alternative media. You can't listen to the mainstream. They spun this completely wrong, and Sam said it was actually worse than what they were finding because he said this study, a lot of the people that my son lived 7 months with this disease, and it does go very quickly. But a lot of these people that signed on to be in this study actually became too ill or actually passed away to even finish it. And the study did not include cordless phones, which are just as dangerous.
Yeah, they've come a long ways with cordless phones. I can remember the first ones. They were on basically the old broadcast, and you had to pull the antennas out, and then they went to the 49 megahertz, and then they went to the 1.9 and 2.4. And so when you get up in the gigahertz range, actually the UHF high end is when microwave starts, which I think is around 600 megahertz. Then you get into the gigahertz. And now with this 5G, we're talking about 25 gigahertz and up. And as you mentioned, the military is using those particular frequencies for pain compliant or for crowd control and some of the others. And that's through pain. That's through burning. That is, and also the noise within the mind is so incredibly deafening that people can't think. Now, when I had Julie Flores on years ago, or a couple of years ago, when she was in Iraq, I believe it was, or it was Desert Storm. When she was over there, they were using it on villages then to quiet the village down. It would actually cause them to go into a stupor, and then they could bring the troops in and take them much easier.
Right, and this is also addressed in the film Take Back Your Power. The U.S. has some of the highest exposure limits in the world, and they actually show you charts of this and there's several whistleblowers that are on this film. So I urge you all. I'm not saying because I'm in it, but I've actually seen it 5 times, and I find I see something new every time I see it. So it addresses the fires, it addresses the radiation, it has whistleblowers on it. It's gone all around the world. They actually showed it in Dublin, California, and they actually invited people in this auditorium from the Department of Energy and from Berkeley Laboratory. And after the people saw it, it almost came to a riot afterwards because people were so upset over these smart meters. So I urge people to really pay attention and start researching this stuff, because we've got to get these things off of our houses. And I just the secrecy behind this whole thing has just been amazing to watch, how they've kept this quiet. And so people just have to get their health and safety and take charge themselves to keep themselves safe.
Yeah. Just to manufacture that many meters is an incredible task. And so I'm going to venture to say that they're all made over in China or somewhere else, and not.
They are.
Yeah.
They are. And actually, here in Fort Collins, where I live, we were charged $322 each for one of these meters. Now, these meters only last 6 to 7 years, and then they have to replace them again. And they put the majority of them on our homes in 2012, so we're getting close to replacement time. And so this is going to be something, Scott, we're never going to be done paying for. And people are starting to see water bills, electric bills, gas bills, just astronomical amounts of money that these. I've heard of people getting $57,000 water bills in a month, and actually have to fight this stuff because they will say that their meters are correct. So, and there was a family in Kansas, I believe it was last year, they had 5 kids, but their electric bill was $1,200 a month. So some of these places are getting electric and water and gas bills that are as high as their mortgages. So this is part of the process to get us out of our homes as well.
Yeah. When I was in Tempe, Arizona in 2011, I think it was, and I grew up there, so I was used to going to different places and parking my car and walking up and down Mill Avenue. That's downtown where Arizona State is. And so I went to where I always parked before, and next thing I know, when I come back to my car, I've got a parking ticket. Well, the meter that they had installed had a sensor to know whether a vehicle was there. Now, this was after hours. Normally after 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, the meters don't work. But this has a sensor that if you do not put money in it, it has a cell phone built into it that it will actually call the meter maid, and they come and ticket you. And this was at 9 o'clock at night. And that ticket was an $80 parking ticket. And there was over 600 brand new of these meters installed in downtown Tempe that they had to pay for. And that's basically what they were doing. And then after that, it's all revenue. So the parking meters actually had cell phones in them too, so that means they're radiating. All those meters that are along there, all 600 of them downtown are radiating.
And actually, there was a lawsuit in California. This is a couple of years ago. There was a meter reader that just couldn't work anymore because these transmissions were making her so sick. But here in Fort Collins, like I said, they charged us $322 each for these darn meters, and they don't cost any more than between $40 and $60. So they are literally robbing us blind with these things, and it's not going to end. And people are starting to understand, and I actually found documents. Our Fort Collins status report from 2010 actually states in it that the smart grid and the smart meters were not to cost the public anything. But I've pretty much estimated we're close to a 40% rate increase since 2010 with these meters on. So it's just a bad system altogether.
Do you know of any states that have passed laws that if you want them off, they will take them off? Do you know anything about that?
There's a lot of people that have tried. I think don't quote me on this. I think it was Michigan. There's actually a gentleman that's wanting to get an opt-out for their citizens and that type of thing. I was actually one of the people that had I had armed police officers at my front door for an installation. So I had sent in several letters to the city saying, I don't want one, I don't consent for one. I gave them the reasons why. And what they did is they came and they slapped one on my house, but they did give me non-transmitting digital analog, which is the one that puts the dirty electricity on your home wiring. But the other thing I want people to understand, and I've talked to several people about this, the Zigbee chip, that is the deadliest part of this whole grid, because now all your appliances are going to have that as well too. So, yeah. And it's crazy. The insurance companies are first in line for your information. These new refrigerators, they'll tell you if you're running low on milk or whatever, and if you're purchasing ice cream, cookies, and things like that, the insurance companies are going to say you're living in an unhealthy lifestyle, and they're going to charge you accordingly. So it's very, very invasive. And I've heard that the kitchen will now be the deadliest room in the home. Wow.
Well, I know just the cleaning chemicals alone for many housewives have been such a disaster for them to get cancer. I've had family members myself that were known to get breast cancer or other cancers from all the chemicals they've been using. Because if you take a couple of these together, if you clean the toilets and everything else, you're subject to all these different ones, and now we're going to be adding the radio waves, and so that's going to just climb.
I had a medical writer literally tell me, they say with this carcinogen wireless, you take this carcinogen times one other carcinogen, and she says it equals 1,000. Wow. So this is the stuff it's all this massive exposure to all this stuff, and there are reasons that we do have really, really high cancer rates in this country, and it's just going to take the public to understand what's going on. I actually took a friend of mine to the hospital last week, and I'll tell you, the hospitals are really bad. So, it's the worst place to go if you want to heal.
Yeah, I actually worked in a hospital for a while. I was a technician, and I used to take care of the defibrillators and the heart monitors and other things. And the telemetry, they were starting to bring that into the hospitals at the time. This was back in 79, 80. And so every room or every floor and every so many feet or so many rooms away was a transponder and an antenna. So you're right. I mean, that's been in there for a very long time. So the people who are trying to heal are being subject to the high frequencies, because that was probably 700-800 megahertz back then, which again means that it's microwave. And so I just imagine the nurses. In fact, I've never tracked it, but I know that in my ministry, what I do here, those who are in the medical profession tend to have more spiritual issues because of the people that are dying around them and various things. And so along with the cleaners, by the way, I know that there was The cleaners they used to use at one time were so toxic that many of the people actually, surgeons and doctors and nurses actually thought they were having nervous breakdowns. And here it was the cleaners were so toxic to them that their nervous system was being damaged. And so I think that this is just going to completely increase. And it's just
I
yeah.
believe so.
Yeah.
Actually, a doctor came into the emergency room the other day, and she had a stenographer with her. You know, like you see in a courtroom, where they take down all your information and they type everything out. She actually had a young man come in with a laptop and set it on a table, and he was taking all these notes. And so, yeah, these kids just don't have a clue, Scott. And I'll tell you, and it's been really interesting. The economy's been really suffering in many areas, and it is here as well. But we've got 3 brand new hospitals, of all things, that have just gone in the last couple of years. And it makes me wonder if they are preparing for something.
Do you know if they're specific trauma centers? Do you have any?
I do know that one's Banner Health, and
Okay.
I've seen it advertised in the paper that you know, it's going to be all wireless, and so if patients need to get hold of a doctor or a nurse right away, you don't even have to push buttons or anything. So I mean, it just sounds like a nightmare to me. But yes, a couple of them do have trauma centers in them. Yes.
You know, when I was working for Motorola, I started with them back in '83, and somewhere around '87, '89, they had gotten the contracts. You know, the country was more opened up to the United States because of what the presidents were doing at the time, and they were still living in the dark ages. They still had everything, you know, the old telephone system, everything was wired, and Motorola had gotten the contract because they literally were going to be hurled into the next generation, and everything was going to be wireless back then. So I can imagine now, after 30 some odd years, what if you were to do a study on the increase of cancer since 1987, that I bet that there's a massive cover-up on this, because, again, they just jumped right into it. So they were actually ahead of the United States because of the, wanting to get into that new technology so quickly and circumventing cable, because you can imagine how big China is, and running cable in China or fiber optics or any of the other systems would have not been practical. So that's why they chose to do the wireless method. And so that means those people have been subject to that high gigahertz frequency for 30 some odd years now.
Right. And it just makes me, I investigated that cancer cluster at the Kelly Elementary School in Carlsbad in 2010. And of course, the same epidemiologist, Dr. Thomas Mack, wrote the report for that. And he also wrote the report for UCSD and SDSU. But, there were, at that time, Scott, there were 59 cell towers and 219 antennas within a 4-mile radius of this school. And also the major power lines. And I've read documents where there were between 300 and 400 people within this area that have come down with all types of cancers. And, it just makes me wonder what's going to happen now with this FirstNet and the grid infrastructure and all this stuff. This is before that even occurred. So yeah. I envision just masses of people coming down very ill and possibly dying.
Well, just in the office here and some other places, people are sick everywhere, and they right. don't know why, and they don't really tell anybody, or they just think that it's something else, and it has to be. There's no question. There's just too many having the same symptoms, and so the intake for the county hospitals, the county health, they've got to have numbers that are starting to accumulate and connect the dots, and so they must be keeping this quiet. Do you know of any conscious effort within county, especially county health?
Well, this just happened about 3 weeks ago. I'm in contact with a gentleman, Joel Moskowitz, out of Berkeley, and he's fighting this stuff with everything he's got, and he is fabulous. about a month ago, he got hold of the California Health District and wanted to know their information on cell phones and brain tumors. And lo and behold, they released it to him about 2 weeks ago. And it shows a huge increase of brain tumors with people using cell phones. And he is furious. They said they've kept this stuff quiet for the last 7 years.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you that the CTIA, the wireless industry, I've flown out to California a couple of times and met with Ellie Marks, the head of the Brain Tumor Association. She hears these horror stories every day. And unfortunately, it's becoming kids at younger and younger ages that are getting brain tumors. But she's been helping the effort. She's been trying to get the right to know passed, and that is to let you know how much radiation your cell phone emits. And this is, I want to caution people on this because we're just trying to get something done. And the reason I want to caution people is because there is no safe level of the SAR absorption rate. So you just have to be really careful and just keep them away from you. But it will cause the retailers to have to list this stuff. And of course, the CTIA, the wireless industry, is, they sue. They're huge. They're worth, I'm sure, in the trillions. So they've got all kinds of lobbyists and lawyers and all types of things that can help them. So, it's going to take a huge effort to get this stuff stopped, but I think we can do it. We're on our way. I'm really going to be positive about it.
Yeah, the frequencies that used to be for the old UHF analog TV became available when they went digital because it went to a different band. And you talk about big money. I don't remember what the price was. I'm thinking it was around $50 million. Google put a bid in during the bidding process for these frequencies. So many people want these bands and these frequencies that the FCC actually has a bidding process, and they make billions of dollars off of it. And Google, just for a small part of the band that used to be the old TV UHF, if I remember right, it was around $50 million was their bid. So that's big stuff.
Oh yeah, and people, he's gone now. Last year he resigned, but Tom Wheeler was the head of the FCC. He actually was in charge of the CTIA, the wireless industry, for the last 13 years, and basically the FCC seat was up for sale. I think it was $3 million to get the head of that. So it's money. It's all about power, and it's all about money. And I'm telling you, Scott, I'm in this, and I cannot wait to see something happen with this. And I hope people start suing, and we can start bringing some of this stuff down. Yes.
I don't know how long you want to go tonight. Whatever you got, we got about another 45 minutes.
Oh, I'm fine as long as you don't mind me being on.
No, not at all.
I just have all kinds of stuff. Yeah, people just have to understand. You have to be very, very aware of your surroundings. And I've actually found stuff online, and this is the next thing coming down that I've been telling people about. It's called the HFGW, and it's high frequency, and it's called the grave wave, GRAVWAVE, and this is broadband through the earth. So this stuff they just aren't stopping with this stuff. It's just crazy to me what they're up to.
Yeah.
And the research money that must be going into it is just incredible.
That's very true. And someone has to design it. Someone has to build it. And so there's companies who do bid for the contracts. Now, it's like D-Wave, the quantum computers. There were bids that went to DARPA. And so this particular company got the contract. They're the ones who are pushing the quantum computing. But so the point of it is, there's a lot of money. There's bidding. There's manufacturing. There's designers, and that takes a lot of high tech people. And
right.
And so Silicon Valley, I'm very familiar with it. When I was in the semiconductor industry myself in Mesa, Arizona, with Motorola and General Electric and Intel and some of the others, which became Freescale and onsemi, if some of those are familiar with that. And then General Dynamics took over the Motorola government division. but we used to interact there. And Silicon Valley itself was so far advanced that the equipment we used always came from there because they were a generation ahead. So I'm sure that a lot of this stuff is developed there.
Right. And you know, it's just incredible to watch this stuff. And I actually talked to Barry Trower out of the UK, and he said that he's warned this industry that it's, you know, they're headed down the wrong path with this, and they actually have technology that is actually safe. And I don't know much about it, but it is using light. And so he told them that the ones that'll be way ahead of the games are the ones that decide that they're going to get out from underneath it now because they do know that it's dangerous, and pay out a few of these lawsuits and then maybe start going in and heading in a different direction. So I think if we push that, and I just hope that people, you know, try not to use your devices unless you absolutely have to. I've had several of these people tell me that, you know, these cell phones were actually never they were never intended for the masses. So, you know, they were supposed to be for women that were going to be traveling in rural areas, or scientists and that kind of thing. So, you know, it was never meant for the masses.
Well, you and I had talked a while back. I was familiar with the first test bed of cell phones in Washington, D.C. And, of course, we know that Senator Kennedy had some type of brain cancer, if I remember right. And I know that he had one of the first phones we referred to as the brick that was by Motorola. And the reasons they were so strong is there were so few towers around, plus the walls and the Congress that they had to have the power for penetration. And so here he is using this 1 watt, 2 watt transceiver that was then a cell phone. And eventually he got cancer. And you knew a little bit about that.
Well, yes, actually, Ellie Marks, the head of the Brain Tumor Association in California, her son actually worked for the Kennedys in their office when Ted Kennedy became ill. And they tried to get them to speak. They knew it was from his cell phone, and they just wouldn't want to speak out about it. And, you know, Joe Biden's son just died from a brain tumor, too, and I suspect that as well. And so, yeah, my son actually, when he was sick, we flew out to North Carolina to the Duke or the Tisch Brain Tumor Center at Duke University. And Ted Kennedy was actually leaving the day that we got there. So kind of we've had all this stuff going on, but that's the reason we took our son there. They had come out with these a new drug for it, but he wasn't able to get on it. So, but yeah, the whole thing is, and I started researching these organizations like the American Cancer Society. Folks, please don't give them any money. I knew this in 2009, that they were giving the telecommunications industry was giving the American Cancer Society huge sums of money. And I would try to contact the American Cancer Society, and I gave them all the information on these cancer clusters and what was causing them. And I actually got an email back from them saying, "Oh, we are not allowed to open links. We are not allowed to look at some of this stuff." So this is where we're at, folks. You if you're going to give money away to anybody, make sure you do some research and find somebody who is fighting this stuff and help fund them, because we want to. You know, I don't want to find a cure for it. I want to know the cause of it, and I'm giving you guys a big clue as to a huge part of this.
Right. Well, unfortunately, your son was really what got you into this. Have you met other mothers too that have lost their sons or daughters?
Yeah, actually, and I want people to be aware of this too. There's 3 boys here where I live that my son went to school with that now have brain cancer, and boys are more susceptible. I actually talked to Deborah Davis from the Environmental Health Trust over the phone, and she told me that the male's brain the myelin sheathing around the brain does not harden nearly as quickly as a female's brain. So the radiation does penetrate into the brain much further than it does, and also this radiation penetrates into a child's brain. It almost goes all the way through a child's brain. So we just have to be very careful, and a lot of the if you start looking into some of this stuff, and Deborah and I talked about this too, a lot of the young male realtors, bankers, these types of careers where they have to be on the phone all the time, they're the kids that are getting hammered the worst. And so, boys are a lot more susceptible. And a child's brain does not develop fully and is not completely, not completely ready for anything until their mid-20s. And this is the problem. A lot of these kids are now coming down with cancer.
Yeah. Well, myelin sheaths, so then multiple sclerosis. Do you think there's an increase in that?
Yes, actually I do. And I talked to Sam Milham about this. So oddly enough, where I live here in town, there was a couple, and they'd been on the Oprah Winfrey show a few times. They had lost their daughter from a gal that had been texting while driving, and they got out of town about a year later and went and traveled to Mexico, and the dad went completely numb on his left side, and they flew him back, and he has MS now, a really bad form of it. But he works for a huge company here in town that does wireless, and he works from home, and they've got Wi-Fi and all types of things. And I took information over to him, and literally, Scott, they told me they didn't believe me. So, that's all I can say on that.
Wow. Yeah. Boy.
It causes autism. It also causes Alzheimer's too. This is part of the reason we have Alzheimer's as well. And a lot of the elderly use cell phones a lot too. So.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, the other is a lot of the heart monitors or the pacemakers and everything else now can be remotely monitored, downloaded, reprogrammed, all of this stuff. So I would imagine that some of the vaccinations with the heavy metals, that a lot of the elderly get the flu shots, and there's aluminum in there, there's squalene and some of these others, and so that's always been my take as to why Alzheimer's has increased so much. And then when you then factor in cell towers and all the radio waves, it makes even more sense.
Well, I actually asked one of these experts, I said, with the chemtrails, they've got aluminum, barium, heavy metals in them, and they're raining down on us, of course, but they actually hit. Now we've got overlapping coverage of cell towers now. They actually, these chemtrails will hit these emissions coming off of these cell towers, and it fans them out. And then, of course, when you're inhaling these smart dust particles and nano, all this stuff, and then all these heavy metals, well, the first thing that radiation is attracted to are heavy metals. So, and actually, I tell people, even girls, be very careful. Don't wear underwire bras, especially if you're around Wi-Fi or any of this stuff. So, just take some simple precautions.
Yeah, I did read an article where that was acting like an antenna, and that those who had the underwire, that there was a increase in breast cancer. So that you think that's what it is?
Oh yeah, and also I contacted Dr. Keith Black. He's a neurosurgeon out of Cedars-Sinai. This is a few years ago, and I told them about the underwire bras. Their office knows about cell phones and brain cancer. He was Johnny Cochran's neurosurgeon, and he's been on several. I think it was Dr. Oz with Ellie Marks, and these guys, they have to be careful. This industry can destroy their careers, and they just have to be really careful. And he actually told Ellie that he had to be very careful about what he said, because Cedars-Sinai had just got a new wing built onto it, and it was paid for by the telecom industry. So this is what happens, and they shut people up.
Yeah, that's what the Rockefellers did at the turn of the century, when there was more holistic medicine, and then they were transitioning over to what we know today. And then by I think it was 1924, 1927, Rockefeller had given so much money to the universities to start implementing drugs. So the medical industry went that way, and so the whole thing was staged. And of course, that's what we have today. Rockefeller, he's dead now. He had 6 heart transplants in the times when his heart started failing. And it's interesting because most people are on a donor waiting list for hearts and never get on it. And here's this man who has 6 of them. So it goes to show what money can do. Plus, the transplants were actually done on his own property. He had a surgical team. He had an operating room actually on his own premises.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing. There's a lot of big industry that donates to SDSU. And, of course, this all goes back to the military industrial research complex. And, we were warned about that from Dwight Eisenhower at his farewell speech in 1961. And I really think this is where we're at with all this stuff, Scott. I mean, they get the military. They come up with some really good things with robotics for people that have been harmed and that kind of thing. But once you mix the military in it, then you've got problems. And so, you do have a lot of donors to these big universities, and this is the stuff they're trying to push on these kids. It's just really sad. I mean, it's really sad. And I do know somebody that knows the Qualcomm family in San Diego, and their home is sheathed in copper. And, I think back, all of a sudden our window screens, they used to be aluminum. Now they're nylon.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, these waves can come through easier now. And, we used to have the lead paint, which probably was a form of protection as well, too. So we don't have any of this stuff anymore.
Yeah. I know somebody who was going from their house to their storage, and they were hit by one of these weapons. And without really thinking, they had run to their metal trailer, their camping trailer, and they noted that as soon as they got inside the trailer, the pain stopped. And so I told them it's not exactly a Faraday cage, but certainly the microwaves just couldn't penetrate through the aluminum siding on that particular camper.
Right.
And now they're glad that they didn't sell it. They were actually thinking of selling it, and people were coming out of nowhere to buy it because it was one of the older, bigger campers. But the way that it was built, the aluminum and the way it was attached to each other, I think they're very glad that they've kept it now.
Right. And, I urge people too, if you go into an elevator or you're in a car or you're in an airplane, a bus, anything like that, and somebody's using one of these devices inside that, those beams are hitting that vehicle, and it's just bouncing around. So you're getting all of this. So I see moms driving in vans, and they'll be on their phones, and the poor kids are sitting in the vans and being hammered with this stuff. So, I tell people to try to avoid those things if they possibly can. So, it's just a massive problem, and I don't know where we start to tear it all down. But I think I've always said to myself, it will take the parents that will do it, and that's what we need to start getting this message out to.
Cell phones, when they first came out, everyone used to hold them to their head. So what about TMJ and osteoporosis and teeth falling out and fillings and everything else? Do you have anything on that?
Well, yeah, Katie Singer releases a lot of this stuff all the time too, and you have the metal fillings in your teeth. I mean, this stuff can all be attracted to this stuff. So, and they're seeing tumors that go from the head all the way down the jaw, whichever side you use these cell phones. And they're seeing a lot of breast cancers. There was a doctor in California, this is about 3 years ago, that saw 3 young gals in his office within 2 months with aggressive breast cancers. And the thing that was striking is when they were taking X-rays, they actually found that their cancers were in the shapes of their cell phones because they'd put them inside their bras.
Oh.
So, these kids, and then you've got boys that are putting them in their pockets, and Barry Trower said we're going to have DNA damaged kids and generations for the next 60 years. So, people need to be very aware of this and start taking precautions.
Right. Well, is there just anything in general that that is something that you and your husband still deal with the death of your son?
Well, I've pretty much gone on this path. I just wanted to know what happened. I sent my son off, and he was perfectly healthy, and although he'd been there 3 years, over the last year and a half before he graduated from school, there was something wrong. I didn't know what it was, and he's having memory problems. He was applying for law school, and I would call him on his phone, unfortunately, and I would say, how's it going for your, all your papers to try and get into law school. And he said, Mom, he said, even if I got in, he said, I don't know if I could make it through. And I said, well, of course you can. And he said, Mom, he says, I literally cannot remember things. And also and this is the other thing about this 5G, it affects your sweat ducts on your under your arms and stuff. My son was having excessive underarm sweating, and I told him, we'd talked, I said he was complaining about his teeth bothering him, he was tired all the time, and he said, I really need to go to the doctor. And I said, well, we'll pay for your co-pays and that kind of thing. I said, and we'll help you. And he graduated from school, and I told him to go. He was talking about getting Botox under his arms for his sweating, and I asked him when we brought him home after he'd been diagnosed, I said, whatever happened with your underarm sweating? And he goes, Mom, he said, that went away after I left SDSU. So this is a warning to parents. This is the stuff that can go on, and it's you need to pay attention to what your kids are telling you. Yeah,
I'm hearing a lot more of people's legs swelling. Are you finding that too?
Yeah, this stuff affects every system in your body. It affects everything. There was a doctor in California about a year ago that had a meeting on smart meters, and pretty much everybody in the whole meeting was complaining of rashes. And I had a gentleman at my house 2 years ago that went through my house and helped me clean up the dirty electricity from the smart meter they put on my home. And I told him, I said, I've had this rash on my leg. And he said, don't tell me where it's at. And he lifted up his leg, and we had it in the exact same spot. And actually, when he was done cleaning up the dirty electricity in my home, the rash went away. So the rashes are a number one, very, very. And also where I live, we have a one of the highest suicide rates for kids in our area. And depression is one of the first symptoms that people will have with all this exposure. So our kids are really getting harmed from this stuff. Yeah. And then of course, Scott, they put them on antidepressants and do all this stuff. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, is this the way they're going to get guns away from people? They're going to get people on antidepressants and all this stuff, and then they're going to say, oh, you can never have a gun. And, of course, that's how the governments can take control of everybody. So, I think about all this stuff. They give Botox for people for headaches now, and, instead of knowing why, and Botox underneath the arm for sweating, instead of getting to the bottom of what's causing all of this. So people just need to start researching this stuff. Absolutely.
I myself, when I used to work on the power, the high-powered transmitters, by the end of the day, I was drenched in complete sweat. It was almost like I was in a sauna. And that was back in the 80s and early 90s when I did that. But it was all lower frequency. It was frequencies that were still part of what they call the industrial, scientific, and medical band, but it was at the lower end. It certainly wasn't the higher frequency. But in either case, I've questioned myself because my immune system even though I was exposed to a lot of the chemicals, has been taxed. It's never really been right for the past 30 years. And so I can't help think that that actually had something to do with it. Then along, of course, with the cell towers and the cell phones. But I have reduced it. When I do have a cell phone, but I try and keep it on the airplane mode as much as possible. And I don't keep it up to my head anymore. Now, some of the wire, like the earphones, those will actually conduct the radio signal as well and attract it to your ears and right between your mind. In fact, I just found out that they've got a new Bluetooth that is wireless. So otherwise you can put it in both sides, left and right ear. They're both wireless. And so they communicate to each other. So that means the Bluetooth is now going through your skull to the other earphone, from one earphone to another. That's insane. I can't even believe that they're actually doing that.
Right. And I've actually talked to a lot of people that get sick from this stuff. And if you have to have a cell phone, I know that flip phones aren't nearly as bad. So you're not getting all this data wave and all this stuff. This is the damaging stuff. It's that constant pounding of that data wave that hits your body, and it's going to kill a lot of people. I have no doubt about it.
Yeah.
So, and I ask people to look at their cell phone manuals. They all tell you to keep them away from your heads and your bodies. But what we found out a couple of years ago that the manufacturers were actually not putting the manuals in some of these boxes now, and you have to look up your manual information online, and it's actually kind of hard to find some of this stuff. So, but I do urge you to, and all of them say this. I've looked at so many manuals; they all tell you this. So, you just have to learn how to use these things appropriately if you have to have them.
Yeah. You, when you first discovered this or first understood that this was what, took the life of your son, did you immediately jump into, going after this, or did it take some time? How did that work?
Well, I had a neurosurgeon that actually told us. We've actually tried to get him to testify, and he wouldn't testify. And I understand why. They will destroy you with this. But I asked him, I said, what caused this? And he told me it was from his cell phone. And I just was, and then we brought my son home, and then they want to do whole brain radiation on him. And I'm thinking to myself, that doesn't make sense. If radiation caused it, why would I do this, So I think I was starting to question things then. And I don't know, Scott, I knew something happened to him at that school. I just knew it. And it's your mother, it's the mother's intuition that can get you, all, that'll just trust your gut. That's all I'm trying to tell people. And so what I did was, after my son died, I think instead of just collapsing on the sofa and I think I would have just died, I decided I was going to find out more about cell phones, and boy, oh boy, and it's just gotten so much worse since then. But I've connected up pretty much with most people. I'm actually connected with people in the World Health Organization, and Ole Hansen, that's on the WHO board. In 2011, when they changed this classification, he was actually demoted, and the office that he was in, they actually defunded him. So, we've had several people that have spoken in his for his, I'm kind of losing my train of thought, but we testified for him to keep this job and to keep going, and he's just a warrior. I mean, and this is what it takes. And Joel Moskowitz from Berkeley, I mean, he just started a few years ago, and he's just been tremendous. But there are a lot of people now. Deborah Davis from the Environmental Health Trust, Cindy Sage from the Bio Initiative. People look this up, the 2012 Bio Initiative report. by Cindy Sage. There's a lot of information about smart meters on there, and she's pretty much dedicated her career to get these smart meters stopped. So, it's going to take a huge effort, and I'm really, really hoping that we can get some law firms on board here to take some of this out, because there's going to be people that are going to be there's already been people that have been killed just by the fires in their homes. So it's very scary.
Yeah. And it always involves children, and that's just the terrifying.
And that's the other thing too. I want to tell people. I forgot to say about these fires, is they are known to go directly to the roof of a home. So that's just another thing to be very, very aware of. So we just need to get our old analog, mechanical analog meters back, basically. And they talk about we're using too much energy, and they'll be able to shut our appliances off, or our air conditioner units off. But see, they take all this data. And in Bluff, Utah, they actually bring this up in the film too. This $2 billion data center in Bluff, Utah. Deborah Tavares took a camera crew with her, and they tried to get into that facility, and they weren't allowed in. And we, the taxpayers, paid for this thing, but they're putting up these data centers everywhere. These data centers have to be air conditioned, and they run 24/7, 365 days a year. So as far as saving energy, it's using a lot more energy, and these meters are using, they run 24/7 and 365 too. They use a lot more energy.
Sure, they're consumers of power themselves in order to operate. And so there was a big push several years ago that if you have a plug-in charger or some device that had a transformer, you plugged it in the wall to be conscious about keeping those unplugged, because when you have thousands and thousands or millions of them, that's a large consumption of power. But now these meters are in all the homes, and they're consuming power. So the very fact that they're talking about conserving energy or trying to approach that is absolutely an oxymoron. These data centers, I'm curious, do you know if they're built underground or not?
Well, we've got one here locally that nobody knows about. It's called the Niobra Data Center, and it's between the Colorado and the Wyoming border. So, this stuff's been in the works for a long time. I don't know. They want to do microgrids, so that if the grid goes down. Actually, AT&T, I actually read where they were planning on taking down the grid so that they could supply cheap wireless. So I'm hoping this isn't the case, but you just never know. And also, I want people to understand too, these cell phones that get all this data, these cell phones, they use as much energy as a large appliance, a large home appliance. So, if they want us to quit using energy, I've got other ways
to
stop it. So, but I haven't heard any of the underground ones, but I would not be surprised if there were.
Well, I know that credit card companies with their data centers, obviously that data needs to be protected. And so I know, like American Express or some of the others, they're actually underground per part of the security. And since a data center could be potentially hacked into, or if someone were to take it over, the access of all this data could be just absolutely devastating to a community. So I'm just wondering if they did such a thing. Plus, keeping it also from potential, the ability to wipe data out because of a data burst or some type of SMP. But in either case, I'm just wondering what the money involved in such a thing, because they've got to be in what's the Faraday cages. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, when you make a Faraday cage, it's actually very costly, and it needs to be engineered correctly. And so a lot of people say, well, why don't you do a Faraday cage? Well, it's not so simple. It's not. There are different methods. There are ways to do it. But when you really need to handle the spectrum from one end to another, a well-engineered Faraday cage is what you need, and not just some of the chicken wire stuff that's out there.
Right, and the other thing too, I want people to understand too. You'll hear a lot of people talk about they have insomnia. They actually turn the meters up at night because it's called data dumping. So they get, this is when they get rid of all the useless data. So this is another frightening thing. And also I've talked to Josh Hart and a few people that are involved in some of this, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard this, and I've actually seen it on a couple of documents where they can actually turn these things up and make them lethal. So, at this point, nothing surprises me anymore, Scott.
Sure. Well, just like cell phones, and let me explain how this works. When you have a cellular environment, you have cell towers that are a certain distance apart from each other. Each one of them is responsible for so many phones, so many frequencies. And the way that they can have more people with more cell phones in a concentrated area is they raise and they lower the amplitude or the power level of the particular channel that you're on. So someone 5 miles away or 2 miles away can be on the same channel, but you're not interfering with each other. So yes, they have the ability to raise and lower the power levels of your cell phones as well as the smart meters.
And they can listen to your conversations if your phone's even off. And also the other thing I want to remind everybody about too is Katie Singer told me this as well, that when you're driving on the road and you're using your cell phone, every time there's a closer cell tower to where you're at, your cell phone will go automatically to max power, so that it connects with that cell tower. So you're just constantly being bombarded while you drive.
Yeah, that transition. You can remember the old drop calls in the old day when they were analog. Everyone always had a drop call. You'll notice that has been lessened to a great deal. It's very seldom I ever have a drop call, but it's per that technique you're talking about. But also the computer that is operating the whole system is been perfected. It's faster, stronger, and they're able to juggle more of the numbers, and that's why less drop calls.
Right. And, and this is why I got into this. I started researching, cell phones, and it led me to the cell tower. And then I realized, oh, my God, what are these smart meters? And then I realized the cell tower itself was mission control for San Diego Gas and Electric. So it's a huge – actually, the Heparin cell tower on the campus is one of the largest grid towers or took to one of the biggest grids around California. I mean, this thing goes for miles and miles. And I've seen where it's linked up to Sacramento now and everything else. So, it's just crazy to me. But that's why I'm in the film also. But, I kind of went from cell phones to cell towers to smart grid to smart meters. So that's pretty much where the story has ended as far as I'm concerned. But, it's very dangerous. And, this isn't the only cell tower on a campus. I'll tell you, these grids, this is how they've installed this grid all through the lower 48 from the HARP facility up in Alaska. They've connected all this stuff on these college campuses for research. And the government's gotten connected to it and everything. So, we just need to get these cell towers away from these schools.
Absolutely. I know as I was researching the 5G and the manufacturers, when the allocation for 5G was sanctioned by the FCC, Sacramento was chosen to be the test bed. So 5G is already in action there. And that means then that they're working with higher power, they're working with multiple sets. And so if you're in the Sacramento area right now, you are already subject to the 5G, which is only supposed to really come online somewhere around 2020. But they've already got the jump on it.
Right. And I actually researched. I've been fighting the city of Fort Collins. So they said they had extensive public outreach as far as the smart grid and smart meters. And Scott, to this day, if I talk to 80% of the people, they have no idea what I'm talking about. So actually the EPA, there's something called the EPA Participation Guide, and they've got an international cooperation. And what they have in this is the IAP2, the International Association for Public Participation, and our city belongs to that. And what it actually states in this thing is they show you where the stakeholders, they're the ones who decide how much information the public will receive on a certain agenda. So, this isn't where they want you, they don't want your information, they don't want your opinion anymore. They're going to tell you how much information they're going to allow you to have. So, this stuff we need to pay attention to and start telling people, because this is how they're, it's not even just the smart meters here in town. I mean, there's all different kinds of agendas, and people, I see it all the time. People go down to city council and they'll say, well, you've already made up your mind anyway. You're not going to listen to any of us. Well, this is why, because they know their ins and outs of what they're doing, and it's just a way to keep the public out of the process.
Yeah, and that's tyranny. Whenever, right. Because the America was supposed to be based on the fact of the input of the citizens to put our laws in and to influence how we want to live, and that's all gone away. When you use power to actually dumb down people, just like they're using these towers, then they're less likely to be interactive to petition this. I don't know how old you are, but I'm now 61, and my brother and sister were part of the flower hippie days, and I was at the tail end of it, and I can remember how they would constantly war against the Vietnam War. They were picketing, rioting. In fact, the junior high school that I was in had to build a fence around it because it was closer to a high school and the Arizona State University College, where a lot of riots were taking place. You don't see that enthusiasm with the young people today.
Right.
They're just going with it.
Don't do
yeah.
it. Mm-mm.
Yep.
So, and I was going to tell you too, I actually had the film Take Back Your Power, and Fort Collins, where I live, is a top 10 smart grid city, unfortunately. But I had the film shown here at the library a couple of years ago, and literally when I was paying attention, I've seen the film so many times, and I walked out into the lobby, and Scott, they were actually driving around the library taking down license plate numbers. So, we have to be very careful about what we're doing, and we need to tell people what is really going on, and pay attention to what your city leaders are doing, because I'll tell you, I've told them several times, you have violated public trust, and I'm telling you, they surely have.
Yes. Well, we're down to the last 5 minutes or so. How would you like to close this out? What do you want to tell us?
Well, I've just been involved in this for such a long time now. I just ask people, if you have any questions or anything, the film Take Back Your Power, www.takebackyourpower.net. And also the book, ANElectronicsilencespring.com. It's AN, electronicsilencespring.com. Frank Clegg, the former head of Microsoft Canada, endorsed the book for us. But Katie, it's a tell-all book about the wireless industry and what's happened. And she addresses electric cars, she addresses the smart meters, cell phones, and everything else. And just do your research and try and protect your kids and your families, because we're at a time, we're living in really exciting, but I think really dangerous times. And I think that we need to have each other's backs and inform our families and our loved ones.
Well, the children can't take care of themselves, so it's up to us. And that responsibility to negate it is irresponsible. And, of course, the victims, when we do not do our job, are the children themselves. And just like you said, the damage to their chromosomes, to their tissue, the generations for 60-some-odd years, whether we make it to that or not, we do have that responsibility. And obviously the ones who are in control of this do not have our best interest in mind. And so we're the only ones that are going to stop this. And they're always going to push it. They're always going to do it in some way or another. So this is a never-ending battle. The alternatives, there may be other alternatives out there that I'm not aware of, that they haven't brought forth. But money always speaks. And so we, just what you're doing is exactly what it's going to take. So please don't stop.
Oh, I definitely won't. So, like I said, Scott, thank you for having me on. And, like I said, I get information all the time. Of course, I'm going to send stuff to you. So, if you ever have anybody with any questions or anything, you can surely send questions my way. So.
Okay. And
alrighty.
And when you get some more ready, we'll have you back on again and pick up where we left off. I know that you were really pushing for, I don't know, we didn't talk about whether we could talk about it or not, but just in this week or so, there was a loss of your ability to move forward in a particular case. And so when you've got something that looks like it's going to come forth, we'll have you on and we'll address that. So. You
bet. I'm creating a paper trail, so it's not a total loss. Yes. So anyway, thank you very much, Scott.
Okay. Well, thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Okay.
Thank.
All right. Well, again, the matter at hand is the fact that we're literally covered with radiation from top to bottom, 24 hours a day, and it is going to increase. And that literally means that the more cancers. That means more Alzheimer's, dementia, multiple sclerosis, all of the issues, and that's just the environment to people. And we didn't really even address the gang stalking too much. So the targeted individuals who are dealing with loss of bladder control, anxieties, the feeling of having to commit suicide, these are all going to increase, and so. The buck stops here. We're the only ones who are going to stop this. And so as we move forth, please just understand that it's our Most High God that's going to intervene. When we come together as one and we petition, that's how we're going to take care of this. So real quickly, I want to remind everyone again that in May, I will be doing a conference. I've got that now posted on Tinfoil Hat Club. You'll see it just below the main player. I've got a page. I've just started it. It's only a general outline of the curriculum and the potential of any logging if someone's going to come from outside the state. And again, if they do, that will be Spokane, Washington's the best way to come into Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. So if you have any questions or if you have any updates or anything that can, bring us up to speed, send them to me. I'm trying to do the best I can. God bless.